Welcome to this edition of CBN News Weekend. I'm Charlene Aaron. It has been 10 years since the most catastrophic natural disaster in U.S. history hit the Gulf Coast. By the numbers, Hurricane Katrina claimed nearly 2,000 lives and cost some $150 billion in damage. And as John Jessup reports, many of those affected by the storm's painful legacy are still on the mend.
Walking isn't as easy as it used to be for Gloria Sanders. She spent much of this summer recovering from her second knee replacement. After 6 long weeks, she sees the light at the end of the tunnel. That's a much different outlook than 10 years ago when Hurricane Katrina hit.
There just didn't seem to be any immediate recovery from that. After Katrina, it's like, I don't know when this is going to be over.
We met Gloria in 2005, just days after the storm decimated the Gulf Coast.
The bottom number tells you that there were no bodies in the house. Everyone survived.
Thank God. Mine says 0 home, 0 dead. Thank you, Jesus. Because it could have been a different story.
Though she's now back on her feet and in her new home, it's been a long, hard road for all who decided to stay and rebuild.
The people of the past are survivors, and this is home for them. And there's just no getting that sense of home somewhere else.
It's a peaceful, hot, and sunny afternoon on this day in past Christian. It was a completely different story 10 years ago when Hurricane Katrina made landfall on August 29, 2005. It brought with it unrelenting winds that lasted 8 hours and a historic storm surge of 28 feet. The storm claimed the lives of 34 residents here in past Christian and nearly decimated the town.
I tell people it's as close to annihilation you can get to.
Most of the coverage focused on New Orleans, where flooding swamped 80% of the city. Smaller cities like past Christian didn't get much attention, even though the destruction was much greater.
Every church, every school, and every public building was either totally destroyed or unusable. Of all the homes in Pasquotank, only 300 were livable the next day.
Because literally we're seeing debris piles 15 to 20 feet high.
CBN News was among the first crews to make our way into the city, bringing national attention to the devastation. A decade later, there's new life here.
This is the new harbor, and this is the east end.
The mayor gave us a tour of the town affectionately known as the Pass by locals.
10 years and here we are.
That's right.
Which also survived Camille in 1969. Homes and churches have rebuilt. Businesses started to reopen. And people are back on the beach.
Everything we have is new. The infrastructure is new. The public buildings are new. So what we have is better than we had before. We just don't have as much of it.
But take a deeper look at Katrina's visible scars. Empty lots, bare foundations, fewer residents, and a seafood-driven economy still struggling to overcome not only the storm, but the BP oil spill as well. Then again, some changes can only be felt.
We had a sense of family. Everybody knew everybody. I knew everybody on my street before, and they're neighbors now that I don't know. There was just a sense of community that hasn't quite got back there yet.
5 miles west in Bay St. Louis, Lakeshore Baptist Church puts the finishing touches on its new building. The church delayed a new sanctuary to focus on serving people in the wake of the storm, a work that began in these makeshift tents.
Yes, ma'am.
It now operates this secondhand shop where customers are welcome to donated clothes, food, and trinkets, all free of charge.
Bibles, you name it. Everything, like you said, everything here is free.
That generosity made an impact on Ruth Boyd, who initially came to pick up things she needed when she moved back, but found much more.
I ended up joining the church and became a volunteer. It's the love of the community, the love of the people.
Pastor Don Elborn says while Katrina brought heartache and pain, it also opened the door to healing while serving others.
Seeing God use the folks in our church to help others and help our community has made our church stronger than it ever has been before.
His church alone, with the help of volunteer missions groups from across the country, has built more than 40 homes.
And that's a church of less than that number of members.
And while the region's population is still climbing back to pre-Katrina levels, some new transplants, like Pastor David Faulkner, now call the area home.
The very heart of the gospel, of course, for all of us, is that we're resurrection people. But it's a special place down here, and it really, in the parish and in the community, it's a resurrection story. There was death, there was destruction, and now there's more vibrant life than we could have imagined.
When it was time to part ways, we couldn't help but notice those we talked to wanted America to know one thing.
The greatest thing we learned from this is we were Americans, because if we'd have been in this by ourselves, we would still be completely upside down. So the American people taught us that they're good everywhere. That was the first and foremost lesson.
I know our world's in a terrible shape right now. There's still compassionate people in the world.
We can not only just look at the people who in the past who had the determination to survive, but to all those people across the nation who've helped us, we have to say thank you, because we couldn't have done it on our own.
Demonstrating the resilience of a region through the strength and generosity of a nation. John Jessup, CBN News, Pass Christian, Mississippi.
And joining us from our D.C. Bureau is John Jessup. John, you actually covered Katrina, as you showed in that story, 10 years ago. What struck you as the biggest change over the last decade when you went back to visit?
You know, it took about an hour to travel from New Orleans, where we landed, into Pass Christian, and the thing that struck me the most was just seeing trees, because I remember right after Hurricane Katrina came through, it literally looked like a bomb had exploded, a nuclear bomb had exploded in the area, and a lot of residents will say the same thing, because all the trees were flattened. They were basically, they looked like they were lying prostrate on the ground, and you could just see for miles and miles on end. And when you didn't see trees, you just saw piles, feet high of debris. So that was the other thing. It's amazing to see the transition that the region has been able to make. You know, when we were in Pass Christian, the mayor informed us that the debris in that community alone, that one community, took up 1.5 million cubic yards of debris that they had to push out after they were able to try to go through and clear out the region, just so that residents could move back in.
Absolutely amazing. And I, too, was in New Orleans when the storm hit. Wendy Griffith and I were there ahead of the storm, and we covered the first few days after it. And I just remember the people that we prayed for. There were so many people who were so desperate. They were looking for their loved ones. But do you think that we're ready and more prepared if we have another major hurricane like Katrina?
Well, let me start off. The long and short of it is no. There have been precautions made. Of course, the levees have been rebuilt. There have been reinforcements in certain cities that lie in that are prone to hurricanes. There are new requirements that they build their homes up a certain level above sea level. They're called BFEs, and you know, these are all precautions that you take to try to prevent or try to secure your home and secure yourself as much as possible. But the long and short of it really is no. And that's because even though we've spent billions of dollars to reinforce and rebuild, we just don't have enough money at the end of the day to really secure the area. On top of that, we also have no guarantee, because you know, Hurricane Katrina, I believe the storm surge came up to about 28 feet, and that was historic. So there's really no guarantee at the end of the day that the levees and reinforcements that they built will withstand whatever comes next.
Amazing. Well, how do you see that the people who've returned after the storm, whether it's New Orleans or in the past, maintain their sense of hope?
You know, everyone we talk to at the end of the interview, one of my favorite questions to ask is there anything else? Most of the time people will say no, but at the end of the interview, after they said no, they all paused for a moment and came back to talk about the people of the country, people who came from all over the United States and really all over the world to help. The mayor's quote at the end, that he said that he learned that we're not just Southerners, we learned that we're all Americans, because he learned that people from the Midwest are some of the nicest people, because they all came, they took time out of their busy schedules, whether it was summer vacation or spring break, alternative spring break for students. People came from across the country to give of their time and their talent and their service to help rebuild those communities. And we can't we can't not mention the role of churches and nonprofits that, as you said earlier, people took time not only to help support them, but support them with prayer and counseling. So that went a long, long way.
So important. John Jessup, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Charlene.
You're welcome. A group of pastors is asking a national museum to remove the bust of Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger. The National Portrait Gallery has a bust of Sanger as part of its Struggle for Justice exhibit. A group of Black pastors called Ministers Taking a Stand wrote a letter to the museum noting that Sanger favored using eugenics to limit the population of Blacks and asking her that the bust be removed. The National Portrait Gallery says that it won't remove it, and more than 14,000 people have signed an online petition to get the bust removed. Well, in health news, if you want to lose weight, drink a couple of glasses of water before you eat. Researchers found that people who drank about 16 ounces of water a half an hour before their meals lost about 9 more pounds over the course of 3 months than those who didn't. The study found from the British University was published in the journal called Obesity. The idea is that water could help fill you up so that you would eat less. Plus, water by itself is healthy for you anyway. Up next, a former New York Knick becomes an ambassador in Belarus. Watch how Jerome Junkyard Dog Williams is improving U.S. relations across the globe. Reaching people with the gospel and improving diplomatic relations between two countries at the same time can be a very difficult assignment. But throw in a basketball and suddenly it can be easier than you might think. Jennifer Wishon shows us how from the Eastern European country of Belarus.
Sports and the passion that surrounds it is a universal language. This widely anticipated basketball game pits former NBA players against the national team of Belarus. And behind the picks, assists, and dunks is an exercise in evangelism and diplomacy.
It is really neat that the American NBA players came to our Belarusian land.
Some people in this former Soviet country remain skeptical of Americans, but bring in members of the NBA and even the native fans cheer.
It's not better or worse than any other ministry, but it's a unique one that can open up doors that no one else can.
20 years ago, Bill Alexson created Sports Power. It's a combination of retired NBA and European League Christians who travel the globe playing national teams and sharing the gospel. The remarkable thing isn't the players' moves on the court. It's the nearly unfettered access they enjoy in the countries they visit.
It's a phenomenal thing, and the press goes everywhere we go. The kids, you say to the kids, jump, they say, how high? And we have our lives changed in the process.
Schools swing open their doors, giving players a chance to witness to kids. Even the highest levels of government pay attention. Jerome Junkyard Dog Williams, who played for the New York Knicks and other teams, is one of Sports Power's stars. His moves are his ministry, and he's growing his dog pound, one bark, one picture, one international venue at a time.
Yeah, the dog pound, you know, it grows every day, and but it's the Lord's dog pound. It's his, you know.
Well, what is it like playing on God's team now?
It's an honor. I understand that my platform that the Lord gave me with the NBA puts me on a pedestal in any part of the world.
Former pro Paul Grant gets it too.
You can't have expectations because magical things happen that we can't even imagine on each of these trips.
Belarus isn't a place where Americans always feel welcome. CBN's presence in the country made national news. 7 years ago, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, known as the last dictator of Europe, kicked out the U.S. ambassador and 30 American diplomats. Since then, the U.S. has been working to improve relations, one play at a time.
The idea is to use sports as diplomacy to help use this universal language of athletic competition to help people understand each other better, and ultimately to lead to better relations in general.
This summer, the U.S. is funding a new 3-on-3 basketball court in Minsk.
Everybody in Belarus knows basketball because everybody watches NBA. It's on national television. So such events and like being able to have this 3-on-3 program together with the United States, absolutely, it will bring the countries closer.
If the U.S. wants to reach Belarusians, sports may be one of the best ways. President Lukashenko is an athlete and avid sports fan. Just take a look at this palace of a hockey arena he built. He even has a vice president of sports who just happens to be his closest advisor.
I'm wondering what opportunities you see for to use sports to help bridge the gap between the United States and Belarus.
Most of the times, many people lack mutual understanding. And sport itself does not bring any political colors inside of it and does not make people turn their backs to it. And the barking of the dogs shown by Jerome, the hoo-hoo, is much more worth it.
Hey, listen. The dog barking is a universal language.
Yegor Mesheryakov is a product of sports diplomacy. A State Department program called Sports United helped him sharpen his basketball skills in the U.S. and eventually play for George Washington University shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union.
It's been a dream come true, really, because growing up in the Soviet Union, you don't really think about going to the U.S. Even getting some visas were a problem. So suddenly, in a few years, everything changed. And we were very thankful for the opportunity.
Now he leads the Belarusian Basketball Federation, sending young boys and girls to learn about American culture and gain new moves on the court.
I was asking them, what's the biggest difference when you went to the U.S. and the basketball approach over there compared to the Belarusian one? And they said the coaches are very inspirational out there. They were very inspired by the idea of women's sports and women's power, that actually such place exists as a women's NCAA Hall of Fame.
Belarus holds a strategic position between Europe and Russia. But before relations with the U.S. can improve, American officials say Belarus must address some major concerns, including restrictions on religious freedom.
It includes concerns about political prisoners. It includes concerns about the right for political parties to participate freely, to have access to free media.
Meanwhile, Christians and diplomats will keep working to change hearts and minds, one game at a time. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Minsk, Belarus.
And coming up, we'll get to talk with Jennifer Wishon more about diplomacy, ministry, and basketball. You won't want to miss that when we come back. Welcome back to CBN News Weekend. And if you missed us earlier, we just showed you how basketball is helping the diplomatic relationship between the U.S. and Belarus. And now with us is to discuss further is Jennifer Wishon from our D.C. Bureau. Jennifer, thanks for joining us today.
Sure. Hi, Charlene.
Well, first of all, Jennifer, Belarus is a country that we don't hear a lot about. How were you received as an American?
Well, I think we were received with a lot of intrigue and curiosity. Belarus doesn't get many American visitors, so everywhere we went, I sensed that people were really watching us and taking us in. I was also warned to assume that the government was watching us. And honestly, I think what made this trip so remarkable for me is that it's the first place I've ever been as a reporter where I couldn't apply American or even Western logic. You know, Belarus is an Eastern European country. It was part of the Soviet Union, and it's the last country in Europe that is literally ruled by a dictator. 20 years ago, President Alexander Lukashenko was elected in a democratic election, but he then rewrote the Constitution to shore up his power, and he's been in power ever since. And in addition to that, the people who have run against him in political elections, they end up in prison. Some of those folks are in prison right now. So it's a beautiful country, but you know, compared to what you and I are used to as Americans, it's a very different place. I was even advised to assume that the government was reading my emails. But I will say this, there definitely seems to be a generational gap. Young younger folks there seemed less curious about us, more open to us than older Belarusians. I even interviewed a man, Charlene, who said that he believes his country currently has too many freedoms. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Very interesting. Well, one of the great things about our travels is we come back with great behind-the-scenes stories. Do you have any stories that didn't make your final edit?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I like to call them war stories. I love meeting characters. I'm from the South. I love characters. And on this trip, our character was definitely our driver. His name was Igor, and he works as a massage therapist / chiropractor for the Belarusian Basketball Federation. So the first day we met, I asked him what he did previously, and in his very broken English, he said, "It was my job to make people talk." And so, Charlene, of course, you know, I had a follow-up question to that. And come to find out, Igor used to be a Soviet interrogator who was charged with, you know, gaining information from people, which I assume is how he learned about cracking bones. But he was a great guide for us because, you know, he could point out buildings where he said, you know, people think we make teacups here, but it's actually where we build bombs. He also spent some time in prison for what, I'm not sure, but he was a great tour guide. And at the end of the trip, we fell in love with him, and I think he fell in love with us.
Absolutely fantastic story. Jennifer Wishon, thank you so much for being with us today.
Sure, my pleasure.
And you can stay up to date on political news by following Jennifer on Twitter and on Facebook. Well, if you're looking for the key to happiness, the answer may lie in a group by joining a religious group. A new study in the American Journal of Epidemiology found that one of the keys to sustained happiness is found in participating in a religion. The study looked at 4 types of groups that people join, like charities, political organizations, educational classes, and religious groups. Of the 4, being an active member of a religion was the only social activity that proved to bring people sustained happiness. The other 3 groups only brought short-term benefits or had no effect on mental health at all. Well, that's all for this hour of CBN News Weekend. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Stay up to date with CBN News through Facebook and Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a wonderful weekend, and God bless you.